Hey guys, so today I wanted to bring you an updated Cyber Dragon deck profile that actually does not use Dragoon, so it's certainly a refreshing change. I'll discuss why I decided to try this non-Dragoon build out at the end of the profile and go over the pros and cons of having Dragoon. That way we can just do the deck profile first. I'll try to bring some replays in another video soon too. Now before I continue, a friendly reminder that I did release some Cyber Dragon merch a couple of months ago, so if you're interested in some shirts, hoodies, or accessories with Cyber Dragon on it, feel free to check my Teespring in the link below. So let's just get started. So starting with the main deck, we have the 3 original Cyber Dragons, 3 core, 3 hers, and 2 Naxter. So this ratio for me has not changed, I don't think, ever. I'm starting to see a lot of people just play 1 Naxter, and I totally understand it. I mean, I personally like it at 2. Obviously, it comes out of the deck with you banishing core from the graveyard, and then this can revive back whatever, the Nova Infinity or the Rampage. But having hard drawn it, it's not always bad. I mean, realistically, it gives you an extra body, especially when you get hand trapped. So I like it at 2, but if you want to run it at 1, that's totally fine. Next, we have Honorary Cyber Dragons and the 2 Galaxy Soldiers, and we of course, the other light machine is the Jizakuru that you can search off of Cyber Repair Plan. Oh, it's a lot of problematic monsters, so always good to have at least one in your main. And then the hand traps, we're just running the 3 Ash and the Gamma package now, which I don't usually play in the Dragoon build because I just don't want to break any further than I have to. But in the pure build, this is pretty nice. It's also a light monster, so worst case, you can pitch it for Galaxy Soldier or it's any monster for Naxter, and you can still discard the driver and the Gamma will still be live, so that's kind of a nice thing with this one. Now onto the spells, we have the 3 Cyber Emergencies, best searcher in the deck. We do play the 1 Repair Plan to add the light machine. Usually you add the Galaxy Soldier, but if you already have access to it, or if you have machine dupe, maybe you go for the Jizakuru instead. And then we also have the Cyber Ref system, pretty good extender, especially when you're getting a beard, for example. And now back to playing Cyber Load Fusion because it is the pure build. In the Dragoon build, I did not play this because I felt that, it was just more bricky than it had to, because I would prioritize Red Eyes Fusion for Anaconda rather than Overload Fusion in most instances, and because I'm not banishing as much, this wasn't going to be as live anymore. But in the pure build, honestly, I really like this card. It has a lot of versatility, and especially in the grind game. It's not something you really want to open though, but in the grind game, this is great. Now related to the Cyberload Fusion is of course the Overload Fusion. You only have to play 1 because Anaconda can just send it off and copy the effect, and I did finally get my hand on the Ulti Overload Fusion. But yeah, it's a great card. It enables your OTKs, and it's also actually fine if you hard ride because it means it's just even easier to OTK your opponent that turn. Next, I finally did it guys. Got my hands on 3 Ulti machine dupes, and shout out to Hussein Mohammed from the Toronto Yu-Gi-Oh! Trades Facebook group. He gave me an insanely good deal on these cards, so if you ever do business with them, I highly recommend them. But yeah, looks amazing, and it is an incredible card for us being able to really tune out 2 Cyber Dragons, go into our Nova Infinity play. It really enables our OTKs, so very, very good card. And then on to some power spells. We do play 3 Pot of Prosperity. This deck struggles in terms of, this deck can brick hilariously bad sometimes. I think if longtime players will know that feeling, and this at least improves it a little bit, although of course your opponent will only take half damage that turn, so you are not going to be able to OTK for the most part. I have OTK under Prosperity though, but you need a really good hand. But this is really good just to dig out some let's say you're missing your machine dupe target and you can finally get to it, and if after digging 6 cards you still can't get to starting your plays, then you probably were not meant to win that game anyways. And in terms of budget alternatives, because this is a really expensive card, what I would actually do is just play 3 Phantasmes instead, because that still gives you a way to dig into your deck a little deeper and actually gets you to fix your hand, especially if you're playing the Dragoon build. Phantasme may work out even better because you can put back like a Dark Magician, for example, and against Dragon Link it's good, but against, I would say, most decks, you'll at least be able to draw 2 and put back 1, and as long as it's live, I think, that's a good card to run. I am still running 3 Forbidden Droplets, and the same ratio as my last deck profile a while ago, still with the 2 Lightning Storms, but I am now also adding the Feather Duster. I did think about actually switching these for Cosmic Cyclones because of, Invoke Shaddoll Dogmatica being so popular nowadays and the Schism, and you want to get rid of it. But I decided to actually just stick with the Storms for now. I think it works pretty fine, and at least worst case, if they get the wind out, we can try to use this, but you more so worry about it post side. So this is a very good card to have. Again, very expensive, so instead of Forbidden Droplet, you can just run Dark Ruler no more instead. It's totally fine. Who cares if you cannot do damage that turn? You just want to break their board and set up your kind of presence and kind of grind from there. And this deck, as surprising as it may sound, for those of you not familiar with Cyber Dragons, it's not like a Unga Boonga just beat down only kind of deck. This deck can actually grind quite well. And the Lightning Storm's of course expensive as well. You can actually just play Cosmic Cyclones instead in the main, or whatever other back row hate you might prefer. And the final card in the deck is just the one Cybernetic Overflow, really good trap card. I usually like to have 2 total, combined with like the main and the side, but I didn't really have room in it this time around. But definitely a very good card to have, and just non-targeting pop. And when it gets destroyed, you can also add a Cyber Dragon spell or trap, so it comes up every now and then. Okay, so now let's go on to the extra deck, and starting with the links, we have the Almirage, Anima, Seeger, Anaconda, and Lambda. So a couple differences from the previous one, obviously. So no Link Spider now, because usually that was for when Nibiru gets when the Nova gets Nibiru, and you bring out a fusion machine monster with Nova, and then you convert the Nibiru token with Link Spider, so you can turbo into Anaconda and bring out Dragoon. But because you're not playing Dragoon anymore, there's no really reason to do that play. These have been the same, obviously. Seeger for the OTK, Anaconda, you still play it. We played it before Dragoon was legal because it really enables really easy OTKs through sending the Overload Fusion. This is to get your baby Cyber Dragon into the grave. This is just to out problematic monsters potentially that you can also Jizakura your opponent and put in zones 2 or 4. Same with the Nibiru token, and then you can use hers or Naxxu to go into this and suck that up. And of course Lambda, because we are playing the Gamma package, and technically our going first play, if we had to, instead of going into Anaconda and bringing out Dragoon, we would use the same materials to go into Lambda. The problem with that play though, it's not nearly as reliable, of course, because aside from having the hand to bring out Infinity and Lambda, you also have to hard draw the Gamma, so it's definitely not nearly as consistent as the Dragoon Infinity turn 1 board, but it is there just in case. Onto the Xyz, we of course always play the 2 Nova and the 2 Infinity. I like this ratio, right, because I've said it many times, I like to go into the second Infinity by bringing back the Nova Engrave with the Naxxu. And the secret rare Infinities have been going up like crazy in price lately. I'm not sure why, but it's a good thing I have it. And of course the Zeus, I actually go into this a lot more now, I find, in the pure build, in the Dragoon build, because I'm usually, let's say, Anaconda, bring out Dragoon, and you can't special summon anymore after. But this card is actually pretty good now in Cyber Dragons. I mean, you definitely don't get it if you don't have it, because just wait for the reprint in the Mega Tins. It's very expensive, and it's not something you go in that often where it considers buying it right now for playing this deck. But it's good for back row heavy decks, for example, or like normal summon reliant decks where like one negate with Infinity may not be enough, and instead it might be better to just have a board wipe instead. And of course, the typical classic Xyz monster in the pure Cyber Dragon build is Pallades. Another going first option, helps with that. The bounce is pretty unique, and it can be problematic for some decks too. And finally, onto the fusions. We do play 2 Chimera Tech Rampage now, because we are playing Overload Fusion and Cyberload Fusion, and you can definitely bring out 2 in the same game, especially if one of them comes out from Nova getting Nibiru or stuff like that. So very good card. It can pop spell traps, and of course, you have to remember, if you use Cyberload Fusion to bring this out, remember that Cyberload Fusion has to be Chain Link 1 for this to be able to pop spell traps, otherwise it's going to miss timing. And I'll link like my ruling videos and card tip videos for Cyber Dragon, so you can kind of get more understanding of that. And of course, just the 1 Mega Fleet and the Fortress. This is to just kind of contact fuse away either the Jizakuru you give to your opponent, or this provides a really good threat in terms of your opponent's mecha buff, because that's a machine. And also the Zeus. I actually went up against a 6 material Zeus the other day, and I managed to clear it out because I was special Cyber Dragon. He had to board wipe, and then I would banish the core from the grave, special summon hers. He had to use the 2 materials again to clear that, and then hers sends to the grave. Hers gets me another Cyber Dragon, special summon that. He had to board wipe again, so I basically got rid of his 6 material Zeus just like nothing, and yeah, it goes from there. Now, in terms of what I banish off Prosperity, usually it starts with these 3, and then the second copies of Nova Infinity, and maybe a Chimera Tech Rampage, or sometimes I might get rid of the Zeus instead if I find it's not going to be as good in that matchup. Another possible target is the Almirage if you have the access to Galaxy Soldier, for example, or let's say your opponent has a monster in the extra monster zone, so you know that you can put your baby Cyber Dragon into the grave so that your repair plant becomes live. But be very careful if you are going to banish this, because just yesterday at my tournament I participated in remote duels, it was Attack of the Giant card hosted by my locals, not the extravaganza one, but it basically cost me second place because I banished this when I shouldn't have, because I mixed up the situation that I was in. So, you know, I could have, you know, done my Infinity and bring out Rampage, do damage. I would have had the Infinity Gate and an Ashen Hand for his, you know, Shaddoll Fusion and one negate for his, you know, Alistair or whatever. But instead I banished this accidentally, so I basically just had like core pass. And, you know, to be fair, he's a way better player than I am and he deserved that win, no question about it. But I really should have done that properly. So just keep in mind, you know, learn from my mistake. If you're gonna banish this, make sure that you really don't need it, otherwise it can actually cost you. And finally, let's move on to the side deck. Just a whole bunch of hand traps. We have the 3 Nibiru, 3 Lancia, and 3 Droll. So of course, good against combo decks, Dragon Link. Technically all of these can be used against Dragon Link, Droll especially. Lancia is good against Dinos and Rogue deck. Oh, Bird Up, it's also great against them, and just Rogue decks in general actually. So I think it's a pretty good hand traps. I'm covering most of the most played hand traps that I covered in my LCS Top Cut analytical video, for example. And then we have some additional back row hate in terms of the 2 Cosmic Cyclones and of course the Red Reboot. This is definitely my favorite back row removal, or back row, I guess, doesn't really remove it, but stops them from activating it. And definitely miss it at 3, but I think you need to have at least 6 back row hate in my opinion, but up to you. And finally, my going first option that I've been playing for a really long time are the 3 Summon Limits. It's really a good card. And you know what's interesting is that nowadays I see a lot of Cyber Dragon deck lists playing this card in the side as well. And back when I first featured this on Team Sam's channel over a year ago, at that time period, not a lot of people playing Cyber Dragons were using this card. Instead, they were opting for more like, you know, Goes a Match, or like something like Artifact Package, or, you know, Lost Wind, things like that. So, you know, I'm definitely happy that I was ahead of the curve on that one. And this card is, of course, clearly really good in our deck, and I certainly recommend that you have it if you don't. Okay, so that was it for the deck profile, so let's just move on to the next section. So now let's discuss why I decided to try out the non-Dragoon build. So for one, compared to previous formats, since we don't have to deal with something like Infernoble Hand Rip, Buster Lock Dragon Link, or VFD in Virtual World, I felt it's much more manageable to go second against the top decks nowadays, and I didn't feel the need to go first intentionally post-side as often, where that Dragoon would really help. Of course, Dragon Link is still pretty intense having to go second against, but I think going second, the Buster Lock version was much more difficult to break. I want to try to make this work and see how it goes. Who knows, maybe I revert back to the Dragoon build, but I really want to stick with this build for now and give it more run. But let's try to go over some pros and cons of the Dragoon build in Cyber Dragons, and I'm not going to cover the pros and cons of the non-Dragoon build since that will basically be the inverse. This also is not an exhaustive list, but just some key ones that I thought of. So starting with the pros, of course the main part is that it makes our going first board much stronger, and it also makes the most efficient use of our resources. What I mean by that is, even before the release of Dragoon or even Anaconda, we always had the capability to have Infinity plus 2 monsters on board when going first, assuming you drew the right cards, but we just didn't have a good Link 2 to go into for the most part, so instead we had ended on something like Almirage and have Infinity suck up the hers that we special summoned off of Nova. But now we could instead use those 2 materials to go into Anaconda and bring out Dragoon. Now going second, Dragoon's ability to pop and burn is really underrated, but being able to out big monsters with ease is also a really big strength of Dragoon. So Cyber Dragons can actually have a hard time outing high attack monsters because we would need Seeger to get over it, and trying to bring out Seeger and Infinity and Rampage takes a pretty good hand to do, and not something that's entirely reliable all the time. So having Dragoon to not only be able to get rid of those big attack monsters with ease, but also doing burn damage means that you can OTK even easier. Phantasme is also pretty popular right now, and when that drops, that's an easy 2400 burn, but with that Dragoon, that actually can massively hinder your OTK if they put Phantasme in defense mode. Another key strength of Dragoon is that any 2 effect monsters equal Dragoon through Anaconda. This can come really handy when you either don't open well or get hand trapped and always serve as a backup play. For example, Core on its own is Dragoon because Core can search the rev system and you can go into Almirage and then revive back the Core and then go into Anaconda and use its effect. Now the biggest con of the Dragoon build is of course the potential to brick with any of the 3 cards in the package. For example, I played a 42 card list with the Dragoon variant, so with an opening hand of 6 cards because we're going second, the probability of drawing at least one of the 3 cards in the package is actually 38%, so it's quite high. I actually drew all 3 in my remote duel match against Ryan Yu a while ago, so I will link that below for you to watch and feel my pain. And drawing these bricks is quite problematic for any deck, but it's a bigger hindrance for us because we are a going second deck and we need every little bit of hand trap or board break cards that we can draw. Now to be fair, hard drawing Red Eyes Fusion is not always bad. For example, against back row heavy decks, and it can end up being a good thing that you do it because there's way more ways to stop Anaconda than there is Red Eyes Fusion, which would be something like Ash or something like Imperial Order. Drawing Red Eyes Fusion when you're in top deck mode with your opponent is usually pretty clutch as well. At the same time, when you hard draw Red Eyes Fusion when you also had a hand to OTK, it can feel kind of bad. You may just try to go with the Red Eyes Fusion play first to play it safe, but then if that gets Ash, your turn is basically over and perhaps it could have gone differently if you decided to just stick with the Cyber Dragon OTK route. Now lastly, one thing that you may not have considered is that our first turn board with Dragoon and Infinity will most likely just hard die to Triple Tactics talents. So for example, let's say you bring the typical board of Infinity plus Dragoon through Anaconda, so you are already at 6,000 life points because of Anaconda's cost. Your opponent is going to have 6 cards to bait out 2 negates, and if they do and they have just talents, they can take your Dragoon, pop Infinity and burn for 2100, and then attack with a pumped up Dragoon for game. And that's a weakness of our going first board because even if you had something like Overfull or you had the summon limit face up, it's not going to matter in that instance. Now of course there's some other pros and cons, but I'm not going to list everything. All I'm saying is, I like both builds. I really want to try this pure non-Dragoon build for now and see if we can actually survive without Dragoon after all. Like I said, I'll try to bring some replays soon with this exact list, and don't forget to check out my Teespring as well for some Cyber Dragon merch. That's it from me guys, take care.